I'm Cora Baird. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the director of UVA's Coastal Research Center. I also grew up in Wachapreague and I graduated from the NUF, so feel free to talk to me about things. I started here and continued on. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit today about pathways into scientific research, and something for you to know is that I'm going to be talking mostly about natural science, about doing things like ecology and marine science, but also this can be a pathway. A lot of students find that, like, even if you want to do something like pre-med, this can be a good way to get some of the research experience that looks good on your resume later. So it doesn't have to be super context specific. So to start off with, first of all, this is our facility down in Oyster, so we're basically directly across the highway from Cape Charles. So if you went to the Cape Charles intersection but went seaside, you would get to our facility in Oyster. And we'll see if I can figure out how to use this thing. There we go. I think I went too far. Oh no. Okay. Also, the font changed since I left my home institution, so I don't usually use weird computer programming fonts, and things actually fell on the page when I left, but it's fine. So the first thing I wanted to show you is just a little bit of context. We'll see if the video works. If it doesn't, I'll just talk to you about it. Our facility is run by the University of Virginia, and people immediately start asking about, on the Eastern Shore we have field stations for the University of Virginia, the College of William and Mary, Virginia Tech. There are field stations here for a number of institutions, but not everyone realizes what a field station is or what it means for those universities to have a station here. So if this video works, it's going to talk just a little bit about what field stations are and why they're important or cool. Hopefully this sound works. There's sound. Oh, it's very quiet.
We must first go out and directly observe our environment. Field stations and marine labs connect scientists, educators, and communities to their environments by bringing the basic tools of science into the field. These living laboratories place scientists on the front lines of our changing Earth. But to fulfill their unique role, field stations must continue to evolve. By adopting new technologies, developing even stronger networks, and incorporating more entrepreneurial leadership, field stations can meet the challenges of a rapidly changing world. City, mountain, prairie, desert, forest, ice, or sea. All of these environments are home to field stations. Though they range in size and scope, field stations are windows into ecosystems that provide unique educational and research opportunities. Away from the hustle and bustle of everyday life.
Okay, so the basic gist of it is that field stations are places often owned by universities or other research entities like the Smithsonian, but they're based in a specific location to give students and researchers access to that place to do research. So we're really where people go to main campuses and think up big ideas about things they want to learn more about, but then they often come to field stations to actually do that work. And so where I work, where I have my career, and then where a number of students come and do research internships is at our field station, where we're really at the nexus of like helping go from ideas to actually going out and collecting samples and gathering information and figuring out how the world works. Let's see if I can figure out how to get action. I'm doing the right thing by touching it, or you just
You sure are, but I'm not.
okay, here we go. All right, so I can put this up when we're done, but I just want to let you know one of the things you can do. So we have field stations here on the Eastern Shore, but they're also all over the place. So if there's ever a specific kind of place you want to study, or if you ever find yourself living somewhere else, there's these this is the Organization for Biological Field Stations, has a map where wherever you are, you can see the closest station and find out opportunities for that place. This is an aerial view of our station here on the Eastern Shore. And one of the things that I want to point out about our research and the opportunities we have is that we primarily support coastal field work, so coastal research, but because of the coastline of the Eastern Shore, a lot of it's super shallow and super easy to work in. So like One of the research projects that often comes up in our field station is working in seagrass meadows, which are in the coastal bays. And then some people will think bays, oceans, big water, big boats, sort of scary settings, maybe not their thing. But this is what most of our research looks like. So this is people walking around in knee-deep to waist-deep water, picking up samples off the ground. So we have a number of researchers who come from all different institutions, do world-class research, and they don't know how to swim, they've never been on a boat before, and that's fine. We're here to keep them safe and make it easy for them to do. Okay, so then we'll see if you can hear this one. And if you can't hear it, can you just sort of like give me some sort of like, not working, because I can narrate over it if you need me to be louder. This is our field station here in Oyster. And actually this one just has music. So this is showing you the coastal landscapes that we study. And then we have a number of research vessels that we run. So we have boats that our staff and some of our students help run. And we have a big research project called the Long-Term Ecological Research Program, and it runs out of our station. So our station supports that program, but then a number of other research projects. And so this is just sort of showing you what our field station looks like. We have dorms, we have housing. Housing comes with all of our internships. And then we have people from all different institutions. So one of the nice things about doing a research program with us is that the station's owned by UVA, but we have researchers currently working there from UVA, from William & Mary, from VCU, from Virginia Tech, from George Washington University, UNC Chapel Hill, Boston, and I'm forgetting one. When I think of it, I'll tell you. But there's a bunch of different ones. So you can come. We had a student from the community college a couple years ago work with us, do a summer internship, and then when he went to interview at colleges, he knew someone at every campus where he went to go visit the campus because he worked with us doing research. So he was able to meet those students, and they showed him around campus and sort of help him see what was going on. So in general, our research goes from leaving the Eastern Shore and then heading out towards the ocean. We do work in the marshes, in the coastal forests, in the oyster reefs, in the bays themselves, and then out on the barrier islands. And if you come do research with us, you'll see in a second, we have a board in the front of our lab. You might make it onto our photo board of Epic Research Moment. Okay, so really briefly, before I tell you about the specific kinds of research you can do with us or why it might be worth doing any scientific research internship, I just want to mention to you, like, why do people come to field stations to do research on the Eastern Shore? This is one of my favorite ways to see the Eastern Shore. I don't know if anybody's ever seen this before, but this is a view, a satellite image at night. And so you can see all the big cities that surround the Eastern Shore. This is what they call the urban crescent. And then we're the dark spot in the middle, right? We're the place with the least amount of human influence in this sort of eastern seaboard area. So when we sort of live our lives and spend our regular time on the Eastern Shore, it feels like there's humans everywhere and we're doing all kinds of stuff on the Eastern Shore. But when you go out onto the water and look back at the coastline, and when you look at a map like this, you start to realize that there's a lot less human impact on the coast here on the shore than there are in a lot of other places. And so we can start to understand, we can use this as a place where we can understand the impacts of big processes, of things like shifting temperatures and rising sea levels and things that are happening at a global scale or a regional scale without all the noise that's created by little human influences close by. Because the human influences here have a relatively small impact on the water. The water quality is high, and there are not that many people compared to the amount of land and water here on the shore. So in general, one of the things that's cool, I never would have thought of this when I lived here, but then coming back and being part of the research community, researchers think of this coastline as a coastal wilderness. So it's the equivalent of like going to Yosemite, but for East Coast natural areas. And so the other reason that people come and do research here, the other thing that's really valuable about it, one thing that's specific for our field station is we don't do any research in the Chesapeake Bay. we only do research on the ocean side, on the seaside. And that's in part because there's a lot of people doing research on the Chesapeake. VIMS and others do a ton of research there. We also are particularly interested in that portion by the barrier islands, but also the portion from the middle of so what we study is basically from Route 13 out to the barrier islands where the ocean begins. And part of the reason that's interesting is because from Route 13 to, like, when you put your foot in salt water, that is the watershed for the seaside. And that watershed is tiny, right? There's places on the Eastern Shore where it's like 2 miles wide, maybe, that watershed. And so when you think of that compared to the Chesapeake Bay watershed, then again, we have this sort of what we would call a reference site where you can look at what are conditions in this place with all this human influence coming from all these states around, and how does that compare to the conditions, the sort of natural conditions that are occurring in this place where there's so little human influence, where the only influence is, you know, the 3 farms and 5 houses between Route 13 and where that water hits the ocean. And so we have a chance to study some really cool dynamics right here locally on the Eastern Shore because of that specific context. The other thing that's really cool about the research that we do and the ability to do it here on the Eastern Shore is that we have intact barrier islands and we can learn a lot from that. So this is Ocean City, Maryland. I don't know how many people have ever driven through Ocean City, like seen the boardwalk or the high rises, that sort of thing. It is on a place called Fenwick Island. And Fenwick Island is almost identical in dimensions to Hog Island, which is offshore of Exmoor and Willis Wharf. So if you go straight out from Exmoor and Willis Wharf, you'll get to an island that looks like this. And so in a place like Ocean City, when they're trying to figure out things like how do we keep our city from going underwater, we can figure out a lot more about what's happening, what kind of changes are happening, and how we might be able to find solutions when we look at an island that's allowed to sort of do its natural thing and see how it's shifting and learn from that, and then take that information back to a place where you can't tinker as much because there's people and people's infrastructure there. And so not only do we get to see things like, you know, the effect on birds and on plants and things, but we can also look at what's happening on our empty sort of wild barrier islands and think about what the things that we learn mean for places like the Outer Banks and Ocean City where people are living on very similar places. And part of what we do at our field station is have infrastructure, have people, have support. So this is a meteorological station that we run. So we have live data streams that are sending data to the University of Virginia and elsewhere and are openly available to anyone who wants to access them. And then we have people like Sophia Hoffman, who is one of our research staff, who helps make that data available to people, helps make sure that it's safe to do fieldwork with us, and does things like drive boats to get people out to do research. Okay, so a couple ways that if you are curious about scientific research or field station work, a couple ways you can get involved. One is just get in touch with me. There's always ways to be involved through volunteering for specific efforts or getting involved in ongoing projects. Another is that we are really happy to partner on capstone projects. So if you need to do a capstone, we have researchers who've mentored students on capstone projects, and we work closely with Alex Foxworthy in Sciences to help with that. So there's always opportunities to do capstone projects, and that works during the summer or sometimes during the semesters. And then the thing that we often offer is what nationally is called an REU, a research experience for undergraduates, and that's basically a summer internship, a paid experience at the station. And those are open right now. Hours are, I realized that's the one flyer I didn't print, but we can share those with you. So I will tell you a little bit more about that. The research experiences for undergraduates, those are paid, they're 10 weeks. I think our 10-week program this summer, I think the stipend is $6,000 and housing is offered if you want housing. And then it's a mentored project. So you come in, go through an orientation, and then you work with a specific mentor. You help us with our long-term sampling, so you get to see the variety of research that we do. And then you also get to hone in on a project that interests you and actually complete your own piece of research that sometimes gets presented at a conference or becomes part of a bigger paper with a faculty member. And I'm going to show you a little bit of information about REUs, and then I'll talk a little bit more about the other. There's a lot of sort of fringe benefits to doing one of these research experiences. And also, whenever I talk about the benefits of research experiences, know that Alex Foxworthy and I've talked about a lot about the capstone projects. Basically, I would consider it a mini REU when we're thinking about it. So similar thing, but maybe like you're not doing it for a full 10 weeks or it's not as much time. So the benefits likely would be the same, it would just be sort of compressed. Okay, hopefully you can hear this one. This is the one video I would really like you to be able to hear. If you can't, we'll nix it. But this is a number of researchers from our program, and then also the big research project that happens at our facility is part of a national network of 28 sites all over the country. And so researchers from all those different sites, this video is a number of them all talking about how to get started in research if you're an undergraduate student and why it might be worth it to do it. It's some good things to know. So let's see if we can hear it. If not, I'll send a link later.
I can't do this. So Austin needs to go first.
Repeat the question again, sorry.
Can you hear it at all?
I would say that any student in science should probably try to get into any sort of research project, especially like the RU that I got to participate in. It really teaches you the different dynamics that come into doing research, fieldwork, data analysis, writing papers.
Many of our LTR sites have site RU programs. I'm a huge proponent of the RU program. At the Cary Institute, we've had one for 25 years, and I think it's a great experience because you have a group of people to work with, you get some training in research, you do a little independent research project.
I try to accept that no job is too small or menial, because it's all about getting your experience, meeting people, getting your foot in the door. And as ecologists, we get to go to incredible places and see things that other people can't even imagine.
One of the biggest, most important things I learned as an undergrad in order to get involved with research was to talk to people. Even if you're nervous and you're not comfortable talking to these authority figures, they are there to help you.
That is a slide I was talking to one of my professors. His class I really enjoyed, and he encouraged me to apply for a position working with healthcare. So if it wasn't for that, I wouldn't be here. I have no idea right here.
The advice I'd give to an undergraduate who wants to do an RU is to don't give up, apply to a lot of sites, and to make sure that you get involved with local science associations.
Becoming familiar with what you want and where you would like to go, and making a list and the steps to get there, I think is important.
My advice to future REU students is to volunteer some time, even if it's just a few hours a week, to see whether or not this is something that you're interested in. And if this particular lab is not one that, likes your passion, don't give up on science, don't give up on research, go to another lab and see what ignites your passion.
There's a lot of rich natural history that we know about these systems, and there's no expectation for new people coming in to have that. And the more questions you ask and the more open you are and the less worried you are about whether or not you know something, the more you're going to get out of those initial experiences and interactions.
Sort out a few of those folks who are doing the kinds of research that you're most interested in and get in touch with them. Faculty are not scary, even though we look scary.
Definitely try to get your feet wet, so to speak, and kind of get into some labs. And if you are really interested in LTR, definitely go visit the website, because there are a lot of sites, and there's probably one right next to you and you don't even realize it.
Do it. Get involved. Go knock on people's doors. Volunteer to be in someone's lab. Show up at an all-scientists meeting. Students are part of why we do this, right? We need to train the next generation of ecologists. Get involved with field work. And it's a great place too, any LTR site is, because you're working with all these people around you that know so much about all aspects of the system. So you can really use that as a platform to build your own unique research questions.
You don't need to find the perfect lab or the perfect project. Find people who you get along with and who are passionate about what they do.
What you really just need is you need a commitment to trying to understand the way the planet works, the way ecosystems work,
and how they might be changing over time.
You would just go up to one of the principal investigators or one of the students or anybody in the project and talk about your interest in it. And presumably, I know what would happen on our site. They would invite you to a meeting and you get to know people, you generate ideas, and it goes from there.
Spend time with some of their senior colleagues who have, in some cases, decades of experience. And so it's mining both the actual data, but the people who have a lot of insight into these systems.
The sort of more you engage with the topic, the more you can grow and understand it and build that vocabulary to then sort of develop your own research interests.
Definitely, the REU experience have impacted my career and professional life, being able to learn a lot of technical skills that I wanted to learn. Now, I know what I really want to do for grad school. Gives me a lot of direction. Where do I want to go? And it is a lot different than I initially thought.
Okay. So we have RUs available at our site right now, and the applications are open until February 15th. So there's a QR code. I can send you a link. Haley has the information. But a couple of things to know, it's a really good way to get started. And even if you don't get an RU, if they were saying like, reach out to a faculty member, find somebody you like, you can just get in touch with me. I will help, I can be science matchmaker. And even if it means that you don't end up doing research with one of our faculty members, even if it means you end up at the Ag Research Station, or you end up at BIMS in Wachapreague, we all talk to each other. So, feel free to reach out and then I can help connect you. A couple of the things to know about doing these REUs, sorry it's kind of blurry. So they mentioned, look, it's a good way to get started in the field, it's a good way to find out what you like, but other important things about doing them, you'll grow your professional network, right? So it gives you a link to the field of study, and in the same way that I just said, if you get in touch with me, I'll help you connect to the right people. It just gives you a starting point, and then maybe you end up going to an adjacent field of study, or you end up in a department that's not the department these faculty members that do our research are in, but it's a colleague that they know. It can help you just figure out, like, do I like this? Is this awesome? Does this totally freak me out? I really like field work, in part because I grew up on the Eastern Shore, but I did things like I'd go out to the coast, but I would never touch the bottom. Like, I will swim, but don't make me touch the bottom. It is slimy and weird. And then I went to do field work in the Chesapeake Bay, and it made me be brave. I had to touch the bottom because they didn't know that even though I grew up in these coastal environments, I wasn't willing to do it. And then it started finding out, I was like, oh, I like these people. They're gritty, they're brave, they're, like to go do things that I enjoy. And so it was just one of those, like, you start to find people who think the way you think and that work the way that you work. And something that's important to know is if that sort of like being outside in slimy environments is not your thing, we also have more and more people doing big data. So if you're into computer programming, if you're into data, if you're into that sort of thing, that's a future direction in our research. The other things that you get from doing something like an REU, often your REU mentors are going to be the people who write you letters of recommendation. Those can be letters of recommendation to a four-year college, to a future job, to eventually graduate school, to another research experience. It gives you a chance to get to know people where they get to see how you work. And so even if they're commenting on your sort of soft skills that are not specific to their field, it still provides a really nice way to make a connection to someone who's professional who can write you letters of recommendation. There's evidence that doing these research experiences often improve your grades in related courses at subsequent times. And it also just helps you build, I mentioned like, it made me brave. It builds self-confidence. It builds this sense that you're not just taking a science class or you're not just studying a certain thing. You are a scientist or you are a scholar. And so it's really nice to come and do those and start to take a little bit of ownership and feel like you're going from being a student to being a colleague. So it's definitely worth doing if you get a chance. Just to conclude, I'm going to show you a few highlights of people doing research with us, and then I think I might have one more piece of information at the end and we'll conclude. So everybody posted here are people doing research internships, so studying blue crabs, studying forest that's becoming marsh as sea levels rise. This is off the coast of Wachapreague, measuring marsh change over time, surveying seagrass meadows. There's a lot of like, sometimes it's grimy and it's hot and you do things like accidentally get your boat stuck in a marsh and everybody has to work to get it off. But there's a lot of working together, a lot of being creative, building new things, hauling samples, that sort of stuff. So this is very much so like sensors and computer-based work. So this is an undergraduate putting sensors out around an oyster reef to look at how wave action changes in front of and behind an oyster reef and how that protects seagrass meadows. So a little bit of field work, a lot of time in the lab processing data from really cool sensors, doing bird surveys, sorting soil samples, all kinds of things. Okay, so the last thing that I wanted to give you a little bit of an overview. So this is a bunch of our people, so you may recognize some of them from the video that you saw. These are a bunch of people that all do research here on the Eastern Shore at our field station. And I just want to give you a sense, so there are people whose background is in data, so there are data scientists, there are people that are really interested in things like forests, so Natasha does forest change over time, she did some of the desert, now she does it here on the coast. There are other people that do data, there are ecologists that sort of study the interactions of plants and animals. That's what I studied, was the interaction of plants and animals. So there's people who sort of come at this from different ways. Max is interested in spatial ecology, like why do things occur where they occur and how do they change at the same time or at different times, sort of these like big theoretical patterns. And then if I go through degrees, then we have like bachelor's, master's, working on PhD, finished master's, just finished a PhD, so like a whole variety of degrees. And then if we talk about income, then we have, so most of these people are faculty or have some sort of position at a university, and you have anywhere from graduate students making $35,000 a year because they're in training, but they pay nothing to go to graduate school. They get paid $35 a year to complete graduate school, all the way up to, for the faculty positions, so staff positions, we're talking $50,000 to $150,000 a year, and then faculty positions, we're talking $150,000 plus per year is about their income. So that's sort of the range, and the higher your income, the more time you spend in an office, basically. Okay, so that's a little bit of an overview of what we do, and you can reach out to me. I also have business cards and handouts here if anybody wants them.